Reiki and placebo. Is Reiki a placebo effect, or are these two completely different notions? And what is a placebo? And what is Reiki? And why do some believe that Reiki is placebo? And are they right, at least to some extent? Let's find out. Hi, I'm Vlad from ReikiScoop.com, and today I want to talk a little bit about placebo and Reiki, because this has been quite a controversial subject, at least since I started ReikiScoop. But even before that, this discussion took place face-to-face with other people, colleagues, and acquaintances. So consider liking, subscribing, and sharing this video so that other Reiki practitioners and enthusiasts can find content such as this one. With that out of the way, let's get started. Is Reiki a placebo effect? And what is placebo and what is Reiki? Well, obviously I'm a Reiki teacher, so it's a bit difficult not to be a little bit subjective about this, but I'll take a step back. And I always, if you follow my content, read my articles, follow my newsletters, you will see that I'm trying to have also a more grounded approach. Because I think that it's important to remember that we live in a physical world as well, but I also believe that the physical world is intertwined, not stacked, not blended, but intertwined with the spiritual world. That's just my opinion from my experience and from my knowledge so far. I'm going to mention three elements, but I'm going to start with the first one, which maybe is going to be a bonus one. I'm trying to go along with the video as well, because there's a lot to cover here, but I'm not going to make it that long. 500 years ago, or approximately 500 years ago, if you mentioned that the Earth is round, or more even mentioned that it's not the center of the galaxy or the universe, you would at least be ignored, if not worse. So think about that for a second, let that sink in. You would be at least isolated from society, or much, much worse. That's because the knowledge back then was limited. Technology was limited. Perception was limited. Even though humanity has been interested in esoteric and even occult practices for thousands of years, and the only time when we have stopped or paused actually for a little while was in the Industrial Revolution period. That was about around 200 years length, together put with everything. So before that and after that, humanity was interested and will always be interested in esoteric practices, spiritual elements. But after the Industrial Revolution, we took a more scientific approach, a more organized and more practical approach to spiritual practices, esoteric practices, however you wish to call them. Esoteric is a bit of a hard word. I'd like to use spiritual practices. That being said, now that technology has evolved, we could say that, wow, we are at the pinnacle of our evolution. Well, that would be nice to say, but imagine in 100 years, in 150 years, in 300 years, that will also be the pinnacle of evolution. So my point is that, what if we don't have yet the technology to prove certain things? And this is another element that I want to mention, which is connected to the previous one. And I'm trying to get step by step to the idea of Reiki and placebo. So think about it. Throughout millennia, throughout the history that we know, that's written history at least, and I did mention this in a previous video, there have been tens of thousands, even more, maybe hundreds of thousands of activities that are scientifically just not able to be proven. Paranormal activities, esoteric activities, spiritual practices, effects that we don't even imagine. And you would say, Vlad, that's nothing. That doesn't prove that Reiki exists. Fair enough. And I'll do you one better. If only one throughout millennia, only one of those events, situations was real. And I'm talking about one, not 100, not 10, just one. Maybe there's a entity that someone saw. Maybe there's a representation of Mother Mary crying out of nowhere. I'm just giving examples here. Just one of those situations or events that's considered esoteric or paranormal took place. Think about that. One. It means that something beyond the physical world from the start. And I think some books need to be rewritten in that case, don't they? And let's be honest, even if all of those people that saw things or experienced things are maybe messed up, maybe they have problems, maybe they were imagining things or are suffering from certain conditions, and I don't doubt that some of them were suffering from certain conditions. One element in thousands of years. Again, let that sink in. Now, I did say that maybe we don't have the technology to prove certain things yet. And I believe Einstein said that at one point technology will become so advanced that it will be indistinguishable from magic. In the future, that is. Well, in the future, in our future, because so far it's not indistinguishable. You know that magic is magic and science is science, or at least we know how to structure or define them. Another element that I want to mention is that there have been scientific experiments on Buddhist monks, and not only, while being in meditation, while they were in meditation, and there were certain devices, chips, I'm not sure how to call them, that were placed on their brain and on their body to see if there are improvements, changes in frequencies, in emotions, in behavior. And there were a lot of changes, not just a few, there were a lot of changes. And you can search this on internet, you can see the studies. We also have certain devices that measure to some extent and observe the aura. I know it's considered, in large, it's considered a pseudoscience to see the aura and analyze it. That's because we have not invested enough in that field. And there's no interest for that, let's be honest. Because that would change a lot of perceptions, consciousness, and books, wouldn't it? That being said, I'm not talking about conspiracy theories, I'm talking about the reality of things and facts. That being said, if we can measure how the mind and mood and body changes within deep meditation, it means that something is going on beyond the physical world. Well, it's connected to the physical part, it's connected to our brain, to our body, obviously. But something is going on beyond the visible spectrum, beyond the part where we can actually analyze elements. Another thing that's connected to the idea of placebo and Reiki, and I'll come more pointed to that in a minute, bear with me. I also mentioned in another video that, we all have feelings and emotions, right? We're human. So far, so good. Have you noticed, where do you perceive those feelings and emotions? Well, let me help you. You're gonna feel or experience them throughout the center axis of the body. Think about that. Where do you feel fear? You're going to feel it somewhere in the stomach area, in the gut area. Where do you feel that anxiousness for joy? Again, somewhere in the stomach area and maybe the heart as well. Where do you feel love? You feel it mostly in the chest area, center of the chest area. Where do you feel the headaches? Usually, I'm not talking about conditions that are those nasty medical conditions. I'm talking about just a general headache. You're going to feel it right here in the center of the head. You're not going to feel it here. You're not going to feel it here. You're going to feel it in the center of the head. When you want to express yourself and you have difficulty doing that, you feel like a tight knot. Where do you feel it? Right here in the pit of the throat. When you have vital energy, sexual energy maybe, where do you feel it? In the lower abdomen. When you feel confident and you feel grounded and you feel abundant, where do you feel that? Well, you can feel that throughout the body, all the body, but mostly you're going to feel it somewhere in the inguinal area. So my point is that all those feelings and emotions are fixed on a central axis. It just so happens that this central axis corresponds to the 7 primary energetic centers, energy centers, chakras. And maybe it's not the mind that generates emotions and feelings, but the mind perceives them, understands them. This is fear, this is love, this is anger, this is hate, this is joy. But they are generated in other parts of the body through other means. If you would go to the doctor when you are super afraid of something, you just got scared. Maybe a friend made a prank, or maybe you authentically got scared by something that you saw. If you go to the doctor, if you could go in that very second, teleport yourself to the doctor, I assure you, there's nothing gonna be wrong with the area of your body where fear has been generated. Because it's not palpable, it's not calculable, it's not tangible. It's an emotion and a feeling, and those things exist, yet we cannot calculate, see them, we cannot touch them, but they do exist, we can perceive them. Before we continue, I want to drop a quick reminder for those of you struggling to remember Reiki symbols during sessions. I know how frustrating it is to feel unsure, hesitate, and even second guess yourself instead of focusing on universal life force energy flow. I used to do the same in my early days. I would stop mid-session scraping the bottom of my mind for symbols' meaning. Of course, I would rarely find clarity in the clutter of information. That's when I started organizing everything on paper, keeping my notes close during practice. Over time, the habit evolved into the Ultimate Reiki Symbols Guide, a practical resource with the attributes and uses of 65 Reiki symbols. It's still the guide I return to when I need insights, inspiration, and the optimum Reiki symbol for a certain situation. So, if you're tired of forgetting Reiki symbols during sessions and want to integrate them in your practice step by step, grab the digital copy on ReikiScoop or the physical book on Amazon. Now, let's return to the video. And they are, again, concentrated on the central axis where the chakras, the main primary 7 chakras exist. So from this I could say, and according to my studies of the chakras, I could say that they are generated most likely by the energy centers themselves, by the chakras, because they are also gates of consciousness. But I digress. That's gonna be for another video maybe about the chakras. So my point is that there are things that we are unable to calculate or to put our finger on yet because we don't have the technology and we have not focused our attention and technology on that particular field. And moreover, now coming back to a more pointed subject from where I wanted to start with the placebo and Reiki. There are numerous studies about Reiki, and actually there were a few studies regarding whether it's placebo or it does have effects. The conclusion was, you can search on internet, there are a few studies. The conclusion was that some of the people, around 40% of the number of people that the study was conducted on, about 40% were most likely placebo. The other 60% approximately were not placebo. They could actually tell the difference between Reiki and not Reiki, and when people were pretending to practice on them versus when they were actually practicing on them. It's not exactly a number that we can use as proof. I know. I'm not gonna go crazy about this. I understand the idea. And I'm not here necessarily to prove to you that Reiki is not a placebo. That will be up to you. But what is a placebo? A placebo is basically you take the sugar pill, as they say. You do something, you take something that you believe it's medicine, you believe it's good for you, but it's actually nothing, and you get well, or you get better at least. Basically, that's about it. For example, a Reiki teacher comes to you and he's not actually, or she's not attuned, but they perform Reiki on you and you feel better. And then comes the question, this begs the question, isn't our mind quite powerful? If we are able to heal or to feel better because we believe something, doesn't that render the mind more powerful than we actually thought it is? I know this idea with the 10% is debunked. We are not using only 10%. We're using a lot more of the brain, maybe to its full extent sometimes. Still, I think there are chambers, so to speak, of the mind, of consciousness that we have not yet to understand fully. And imagine if our mind is that powerful, our subconscious takes action and actually says, you are now being healed. Let that sink in as well for a moment. But what if Reiki is not a placebo? What if all the therapy of Reiki, and not only Reiki, take many other practices, work together with the idea of the mind acting upon the healing process as well? To put it simple, what if both exist in that same moment? What if Reiki has an effect and placebo has an effect? What if in that moment the healing or the practice is even more amplified because your mind, or the conscious or subconscious, takes action for you to become better, healed, how you wish to become? That's why affirmations have a role, to make a parenthesis here. They bypass the conscious, they go to the subconscious. And things happen, and we have proven that things happen when you do certain continuous affirmations in certain moods, when we are in certain moments of our lives. Something changes there, something begins to be triggered, something begins to shift. So, the thing is that in my perception, Reiki is not a placebo. Why? Because when I started Reiki a long time ago, I was quite young. I was about 19 years old, if I recall. 18, 19 years old. And I went 50-50. I was interested in spiritual practices. I was interested in spirituality, I have to admit. Because that's why I went initially to Reiki, to test, to see new things. But I was a bit skeptical. I saw my teacher back then perform some healing on my mother, and I was like, I wanted to laugh when I saw the cleansing things and everything. But then I started practicing Reiki. So I went 50-50, and then I started practicing on me without expectations, but without being blocked as well. And I saw changes gradually. And I became more emotionally aware. I needed less rest. I was more in tune with myself. And you could say, Vlad, you were just becoming more mature maybe because you were young. Well, that may be true. But what I felt in a short amount of time changed me for the rest of my life. And I continued doing Reiki, and then I experimented. I went to do Reiki like crazy for 5-6 months without getting out of the home. I had time, I had my breaks, so I could do that. But then I give up on Reiki as a pausing it, not give up completely. I just placed it on pause, on hold. And I was feeling like something is missing from my life. And you could say, Vlad, maybe that's a psychological addiction. And I thought it's not, because I know how fulfilled I was when I was doing Reiki, and something was missing. And giving it up made me understand that this really helped me develop myself on all levels. From a physical standpoint, mental standpoint, emotional standpoint, spiritual standpoint, all the standpoints. That's my experience. So although I cannot prove to many of you who are skeptics, and that was not the point of the video from the start. If you are so far, I'm sorry. I didn't want to waste your time. Although I'm not here to prove that that Reiki is a placebo, or if it's not, I can tell you from my experience and the experience of about 95% of the practitioners I've encountered, that I've met online, physically, face-to-face, all combined, about 95% of them have changed their lives, have improved their lives considerably. There was maybe a 4 or 5% who were giving it up for various reasons. Not because they didn't have effects, but because life got in the way, or because they had too many responsibilities, whatever the case. Maybe there was 1% who maybe didn't feel or were not happy with the results of Reiki. But 1% or 2% out of the thousands of people I've met over the years, in more than 20 years of practice and engaging with Reiki. That tells a lot, I think. But that's just my experience. I'm not here to convince you of any kind of aspect. I'm just telling you some facts as much as I can. Again, there are studies on the internet regarding placebo and Reiki. I didn't say what Reiki was. I said what placebo was. Well, Reiki is a practice that places your body, mental, emotional, spiritual, energetical body in a state of healing. And this healing means not only just healing, means restructuring, refreshing, recalibrating your emotional part, your mental part, getting to the root cause of certain problems or imbalances in your life, understanding where you come from, understanding what you are doing. And Reiki can be simple, but if you take a closer look, it can be a bit complex. You need to know what you're healing. We all have an energetic anatomy. And I believe that's really not so much of a conspiracy nor a pseudoscience thing to say that we also have an energetic anatomy. Here's one thing for you before I close this video. Think about acupuncture. Acupuncture. In many countries, including mine, it has been integrated within modern allopathic medicine. Why? Acupuncture does not address physical elements. If you cut a person, sorry for saying that, you will not see the meridians. They are not there. They are not physical. Neither the meridian points, neither the meridians as energetic channels, because that's what they are. And they connect organs and tissue and muscle. And there are like hundreds of them. There are a few main ones, 8 of them. 2 super main ones and 8 main ones, and then come the secondary ones. That's not important right now. You cannot see them. So why integrate that? What are you treating with that? What are you addressing with that? With acupuncture, you're addressing energetic channels, energetic points, intersections of meridians. And meridians, the idea of meridians comes from ancient Chinese medicine and philosophy. And it addresses the energetic body and the energetic anatomy to some extent at least. They may not have chakras, but they have this idea with energetic channels. How is that possible that it's integrated in modern medicine? Why? Why would placing a needle in a certain part of the body would do what? In reality, what it does, it releases negative or stagnant or residual energies from that place and it activates. That's why they rotate the needle into the intersection of meridians so that it stimulates it to have a different flow, a different flux of energy. And we have that in modern medicine. So step by step, my point is, I'm going to return to the beginning. Step by step, maybe we'll have the technology, awareness, perception, dedication to invest in things, knowledge and elements that can prove that Reiki is real. And not only Reiki, meditation, theta healing, many practices that really help the human consciousness, the human body from an emotional standpoint, psychological standpoint, physical standpoint, energetic standpoint, spiritual standpoint. Humans are not meant to just be connected to they are meant to be here in the physical world, that's for sure, but we are meant to have a more deeper connection with ourselves, with our inner self, our spirit, our soul, our mind, and the divine consciousness. Think about that. With that being said, thank you so much for watching and consider liking, subscribing, and sharing if you would like that other Reiki practitioners or teachers find content such as this one. That being said, thank you so much for watching until the end. Blessings to you, and I'll see you in the next video. Before you go, there's one last thing I want to share to support your Reiki journey. If you let Reiki slip into the background of your life and you're ready to bring it back, this message is for you. I know how it feels to return after a long absence and feel like you've forgotten how to connect. You go through the motions, but questions arise each time you seem to make progress. My solution was to go back to my Reiki teacher and regain my confidence and rhythm in group sessions. But when you don't have the luxury to spend time with like-minded individuals, motivation dries out. That's why I created the 21 Reiki Challenge, a free program where we practice Reiki together for 21 days. Over 2,000 Reiki enthusiasts took on the challenge to rebuild their habit and reconnect with universal life force energy. You don't have to bring Reiki back into your life all alone. Just click the link in the description below, sign up, and let's practice Reiki together. Join the 21 Reiki Challenge to return to Reiki with confidence and support.